Hello and welcome back to the Starter Set. I'm one of your hosts, Mark. I am with my friend Ian here, and today I am joined by none other than the totally epic Dead Broke Dad, who's joining us
Hello.
on the show, which is amazing. Ralph
Yes.
is the Dead Broke Dad's name. He's going to be going by Ralph on the show. But
Sure.
Ralph, welcome in. We're so glad to have you on the show.
Thanks. Big fan boy.
Yeah, but you're
buy,
legally obligated to be a fan. So
Yes,
you know.
I get all your merch.
Oh, yes, wonderful.
Nice.
Nice. We're repping the old school merch here. We're gonna need to get some starter set merch at some point.
There you
soon.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wore my Legends Cast hat the other day, and then I was on a call with somebody from our church who was wearing a Legends Cast hat, which
Let's
was
go.
yeah. So there's one rolling around Canada somewhere.
Canada.
still. Yeah, and it's
Canadian.
vintage, man. Yeah, it's vintage.
That's
We're gonna
fine.
start off with a question because tonight we are talking about Star Wars Unlimited, new trading card game by
Mhm.
Fantasy Flight Games. We've talked about post show. We announced last week as well, but we're gonna kick off, and I'm gonna have Ian start us off. What is your favorite Star Wars character in the theme of Star Wars tonight, and why is it Jar Jar?
Oh boy, it's certainly not Jar Jar, but however, it is from one of my top 3 films. This is my third best Star Wars film. I'm starting myself off as if people didn't hate me enough for my LOR opinions. It is also from Phantom Menace, and that is my favorite Star Wars character is Qui-Gon Jinn.
Good choice.
And fantastic. If you haven't seen that movie in a while, as adults, setting aside the annoying Jar Jar stuff and setting aside the terrible line readings from Natalie Portman, absolutely terrible directing. But so much of that plot is actually really smart. And also the choreography is this perfect middle ground between like it getting maybe a little too flashy in Revenge of the Sith and it being way better than the original trilogy, including some epic lightsaber twirling and whatnot from Qui-Gon, including he has basically at one point, it's subtle, but he has basically like a samurai style draw into a strike, which we'd really never seen before. And just really epic. So Qui-Gon Jinn also just heartbeat of that movie and played by the incomparable Liam Neeson.
Mhm.
So
I feel like
Qui-Gon fan.
oh yeah, I feel like Natalie Portman, her character as Padme, like I look worse upon her in Phantom Menace because of the next 2 movies. Like if she wasn't in the next 2 movies, I actually think that I would remember her in Phantom Menace far more fondly because there are some of the worst moments in movie history with her and Anakin in episodes 2 and 3.
If they could have
Riding
just
the giant space ticks.
yeah. Well, and I have also I just want to shout out my second favorite has become Count Dooku. And Tales of the Jedi and the relationship between Qui-Gon and Count Dooku and Obi-Wan, that sort of trio is really interesting. And so Qui-Gon and Count Dooku, favorite hero, favorite villain.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ralph, how about you?
Yes.
What's your favorite Star Wars? You could do it. You could do hero and villain too. I'm
Yeah,
open
let's
to
do
that.
Do hero villain. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm totally
All
okay
right. Well, hero. Or wait, what's your weapon?
Wait, is that
That's one of the most bizarre promo things. This was you buy a Slurpee in this and pay an extra couple bucks, and you got a character, a topper on it, and then what you would do is drink your drink out of Yoda's back. Straw would stick up. It was one of the dumbest things. And I had a Watto. From the flying
from Phantom Menace,
in Phantom Menace, and then I had Yoda, and I think Ian had Anakin.
I had Anakin,
with the goggles. So I love Yoda. I loved Yoda since he showed up in Empire Strikes Back. Huge Muppet fan. And so I just loved what they did, something serious. And when he turns to the camera and he says, "I'm not afraid, you will be." I just, like, whoa, how did they do that with a Muppet? And so I've always loved Yoda, and probably one of my top 3 moments is when he got to face off with Dooku, and just the
yeah.
twirling
So
around. It was so
good, yeah.
creative, and
Yeah,
he
the
just
first
he-
time you see that
And
like,
absorbing the Force lightning.
yeah,
Right?
It's like
so cool.
yeah. Villain. Ooh, that's a tough one. Huh. I like Dooku as well. I mean, not to fall back on what you're saying, but Dooku's complicated. And when you just see the movies and you see him, and you don't have all the backstory, from the television shows, he's such a great actor. There's a lot going on in his mind, and so you can see in some places regret, and then of course, he taunts Obi-Wan when he fights him, and draws out Anakin to strike him, and it's just he was gone a little bit too soon for me in the third episode 3. I would say that I really like Dooku as well.
Yeah, great choice.
gone too
Well
early.
done.
You mean by like immediately dead in that
Well,
movie.
yeah. But honestly,
almost opening scene.
But honestly,
That's it.
despite the fact that he never got much screen time, he didn't get too much screen time in the movies outside of 2. Man, was he just like such a great villain in Clone Wars,
So good.
and like you just develop so much. You love to hate him in Clone Wars, and I think he's also one of the most like. He's the only villain in Clone Wars that's not completely one note. I mean,
Right.
we love. I guess Maul is not necessarily one note, but like, I mean, let's be honest. Sidious, Ventress, Grievous, they're all just a character concept.
Yeah.
Dooku really taps into something that they did a lot in Star Wars, was to create villains that had relatable moments, right?
Mhm.
Because Vader has these relatable moments. Dooku has this relatable moment where, like, sort of like Thanos, right? There's a certain point in which you kind of agree with him. And I think that's right. You kind of commiserate with like a lost Anakin. You sort of understand sort of the Dooku who turns to the dark side. And to a certain extent, like, Maul's interesting because it's like they only brought him back because of how many people loved him. You can kind of see that.
Yeah.
But even like Ventress sort of like at the end gets discarded by Dooku and kind of tries to find her own way, and you almost have these like redemptive moments where she's exploring the world with fresh eyes, or like right at the end of Clone Wars.
Yeah, that was in
I
like
think it's interesting.
the final season of Clone Wars, right? Like the
I think it's like 7, like
the one they did
didn't
like a
get
few years
released.
after, right?
Yeah.
It
was just
like
very
on
good.
Disney
By the way.
Plus, yeah.
Well, for me, my favorite Star Wars character comes from Clone Wars, and that's Ahsoka Tano. I think I don't mind Ahsoka in the most recent shows and the live action stuff. She's fine in that. But I just really grew to love Ahsoka. Loved her fighting style, the split lightsabers, the moments of conflict and trust with Anakin, her relationship with Fives and with Rex and with all of the other clones.
Yeah, Rex for
Rex
sure.
specifically, I think was really unique.
Yeah.
And for a long time, my favorite villain was Ventress, just because I thought a Sith assassin was kind of like super freaking cool.
Yeah.
But if I had to be honest, he's more of an anti-hero now, I guess. But prior to Book of Boba Fett is my favorite.
Boba Fett. Yeah. That's a fun overlap.
That really is.
If we just Dad and I have this thing where we just randomly say Boba Fett, and it was because like this dude at this card store that we went to when we played Versus System would always just randomly, when somebody what was it when they walk in the door, something unexpected happens, Boba Fett. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think it has to be Boba for me, because like I don't, when George Lucas created Boba Fett, I don't think there was this thought that they were going to create so much of the Mandalorian legacy, and then the Mandalorian armor, and then Mando itself becoming a show. And in many ways, a lot of people like Mandalorians more than Jedi. And
these days,
like, it's just so iconic, right? Like the helmet, the armor is such and it's almost becoming as iconic a part of the Star Wars universe as a lightsaber is in some cases, is the helmet of Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like him for that reason. It's like, man, he was probably a relatively, he wasn't a background character in 4, 5, 6, but he wasn't a main character, didn't have any lines, right? But it was his armor that people fell in love with. His look and his armor, and just like the sinister nature of him, and the flamethrower and the grappling hook, and like all of the cool stuff that literally has spawned this huge part of the Star Wars universe now. And that's all thanks to George Lucas making Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm.
So
can I throw out one more fantastic villain that I am just literally just desperate to have in Star Wars Unlimited?
Sure.
CAD Bane. CAD Bane. Yeah. I like CAD Bane more than Boba Fett. I am a huge CAD Bane fan. I blame Dad for making me watch westerns as a kid. Yeah, but I mean, he's just the epitome of cool, man, as far as bounty hunters go. His voice with the weird, like, the tubes in his neck,
like the
and
voice,
and the jet booster, his hat. It's just it's like they made a absolute scummy bounty hunter just so cool. And the episode where Obi-Wan like goes undercover as a bounty hunter and gets like a whole like face reconstruction, and then like has to break Cad Bane out of prison, right? and Cad Bane just getting so angry that the guards were playing with his hat. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Classic.
I literally bought Cad Bane in Star Wars Legion, the miniatures game, and painted him, even though I don't play an army that he can be played in. I wanted him because he's so cool.
He is cool. Yeah,
very cool. Yeah. Well, today we're going to be talking about Star Wars Unlimited. So I'm going to give a 10,000-foot view run over of the game. There is a YouTube video out where I get into a lot more details about the game. So if you want to like really learn the nitty gritty, you can do that. And then we're going to talk about its interactions. We're actually going to do a history of Star Wars card games with Ralph, which is really exciting. But let me just give you a quick overview, and then we'll dive into some of the history of other card games. So Star Wars Unlimited is a trading card game by Fantasy Flight. Told you that already. You're going to make a 50 card deck, and then separate from that 50 card deck, you are going to have a leader and a base. That leader and that base are going to have icons on them. They will be your leader will have one of 4 factions: red, aggression; green, leadership; blue, vigilance; or yellow, cunning. And then your base will have one of those 4 icons on them. But your leader will, additional to that, have a second icon that will either be the villainy icon or the heroism icon. You'll then make a 50 card deck with any cards that you want. And if you play a card that can be covered, all icons on the card can be covered by your base and leader, you pay that at its flat cost. If you play a card that you can't, let's say you have a green card in your deck and you are playing blue yellow, then you're going to pay 2 additional resources to be able to play that card. This game, you're going to draw 6 cards. You can mulligan once. If you mulligan, you must mulligan all your cards, shuffle your deck, draw 6 new. You'll choose 2 cards from your hand to play face down as resources. You have 2 lanes like Elder Scrolls Legends, 1 space lane where you're going to put literally units that say space on them, and 1 ground lane where you're going to put units that say ground on them. Your whole goal is to eliminate your opponent's base. Your base will have 30 health in the base game, or 25 if you have one of the rare bases, and those rare bases have an extra ability on them. And this is a lot like Legends of Runeterra in the fact that you're going to take an action, and then your opponent is going to take an action. It is not like Legends of Runeterra in the effect that when you attack, you only get 1 attack. You're going to attack with 1 unit at a time. And on your turn, you can do a couple things. You can play a card from your hand, whether that be a space unit, ground unit, or an event. You can attack with a unit to your enemy's base or into one of your enemy's units that are on the board. And then you can use actions that are on your card, or you can use an epic action, which you can only use once per game, which is on your leader and base. Then the other options you can pass, which allows you to say, I'm not going to do anything this round. And if the turn gets back to you, you can continue to interact. Or you can choose to take initiative, which is saying, I'm done playing for the remainder of this round, but I'm going to go first next round. And once either one person takes initiative and the other person passes, or both people pass, the round is going to end. You're going to draw 2 cards, pick 1 card from your hand. optionally to turn into a resource by playing it face down. You're going to unexhaust all of your units on the board and all of your resources, and you're going to start a new round. And the first person to eliminate the other person is going to win the game. I don't think there's a lot in that rule set that I'm missing. The only thing is combat attacker has priority, so similar to Hearthstone or Elder Scrolls Legends, not like, say, Magic the Gathering or Legends or Runeterra, where you're going to attack and your opponent is going to choose who to block with. You're actually going to choose what your units are going to crash into, which means there's also units with Sentinel, which is basically taunt from other games, that are going to block up the field, and you have to crash into them. Your units are going to take damage back, and that damage is going to stick on them, unlike other games like Magic the Gathering. And once your unit is eliminated, it will go to the discard. The epic action for your leader is once you reach a certain number of resources, you can flip them and put them into the ground field. They're usually really powerful, and it doesn't actually cost you any resources to do that, and they come in ready to go unexhausted. And then lastly, once they get removed, they actually flip back over and they go back down by your base, and you can continue to use their sort of undeployed ability throughout the remainder of the game. And did I do it, Ralph, in the end? Did I miss anything?
I think you hit all the highlights. There's keywords that you need to occasionally look up once or twice, but most of it, if you've played any of these type of CCGs or many digital games online, you kind of just have to translate it. Overwhelm is trample, things like that.
I think there's only about 6 keywords in the base set.
Right?
They kept it relatively lean, which thank goodness, because that was a huge criticism we levied at Warp Forge.
Yeah, you did.
55 different keywords.
I know, yeah.
But I think it's like shielded, sentinel, restore, grit, which not many have. Saboteur, and ambush.
And
which
raid.
ambush is basically rush in. You can attack into an enemy unit, but not into the enemy base. The turn it comes down, sentinel blocks the field. Grit, it gets more powerful. There's the rally one, that it increases attack only when it's attacking.
Raid.
Restore heals your base. And shield is exactly what you think it would be. It is barrier in any other game.
Yeah, divine
shield
shield in Hearthstone. Yeah.
If I can throw out one more thing that I can't remember if you mentioned this or not. Obviously, you started talking about the aspects on the cards, and what's cool about Star Wars Unlimited is that you can build your deck with any card you want. However, each card is going to have between 0 and 2 attributes on it. And so you will have those attributes on your base and on your leaders, as Mark said earlier. But if you are trying to play a card that you are missing attributes for each attribute that you are missing, you can still play it, but you'll have to pay 2 extra. So, for instance, if you're playing a villainy deck, right? And it's villainy and cunning and command. If you have an aggression card that's you will have to pay an extra 2 on top of its normal cost in order to play it.
And to be and that's for every icon you can't cover, right? So if there's 2 icons you can't cover, it's going to cost you an additional 4. So can we just say this at the front end, that the word unlimited is a total gimmick, because all cards that you're going to pay tax on make them almost virtually trash. I think there's one card in the game I would pay the tax on, and that's the card Cunning. I could pay 6 for because it's that good. All other cards are garbage.
I think. Oh, go ahead, Dad.
No, I was just going to say where I think largely the ability to be able to pay more and use a card is in draft, where you just don't have enough of the colors you need. You only open 6 packs and whatever, and then you look and say, well, here's a 5-drop. It's got a really good effect to draw cards. It's okay. I'll pay an extra 2, and it'll be filler. If nothing else, I can throw it into the resource row. But I think draft is where that's really going to come out. I think for the most part, you're right. For when you're building your own deck, you're probably not going to use a whole lot of them, but it is kind of cool that you can. The other thing I want to say about these aspects, I'm colorblind, red-green. And so when people, give me the red cards. Oh man, which are those? They're nice, handy. easy to read symbols to be able to tell once you know that this is villainy, this is aggression, red's aggression. Once you know that, it's easy for me to see that. Lorcana drives me nuts trying to look the purple and the green. I can't tell the
And
difference
the
between them.
symbols are
And the symbols are microscopic. And I was like, oh, what
yeah.
is this?
They're
And
also none of the symbols are particularly distinct from the others.
correct. Yeah. They don't seem to mean anything, but yeah, but I just wanted to throw that out. So for colorblind players, you're covered.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'll point out one other thing. There are a handful of the cards in the game that have a double icon of the same color. So there's 3 double red, 3 of each faction, and you have to cover both of those. So in this case, there actually is times, because these cards are typically very strong. In the example of the card that I have on the screen right now, it is not. It's actually trash. But some of the cards are really, really strong. In order to not pay tax on those, you have to play a base that matches the Keller and a leader that matches the Keller, because you have to cover every icon on the card with an icon on your card. You're not just matching Kellers, you are matching icons, which I think is an interesting thing. So like but you're right, Ralph, because when Fantasy Flight came out, they were asked like, why did you do that with like being able to put any card in your deck? And they did come out and say their primary motivator for that was they wanted to do a really good job enabling sealed and draft for this game so that it could be played regularly at local game shops. And I played one sealed game with 6 packs with a pre-release kit. And I think I got lucky and I had enough in 2 factions to make my 30 card deck. But if you're doing a draft with only 3 packs, because that's what you draft with is 3 packs, and you only get a choice of 3 leaders, because you pull your first 3 leaders, you pick which one you want, and then you draft from the packs. Yeah, you could definitely run into a situation where you're going to have play some off faction cards, just because you don't have any other choices. That's definitely the case.
That's one of the things, though. I'll say, like, too, just because there's no good examples of wanting to splash something outside of your color combination now does not mean that won't happen in the future. So this is actually a mechanic that Dad and I are very familiar with because it is a sort of signature mechanic of Legend of the Five Rings, specifically the older version of the game. So in the older version by AEG, you had a clan, and so your stronghold, effectively your base, dictated what clan you played. You could play unaligned characters at the regular price, effectively. Ronins, yes. But you had to pay a premium on your non clan characters. And so most of the time that meant you never played them until there would be a particular card that just meshed so well in the synergy with your other cards, and you mostly saw this with combo decks or with decks that generated a ton of resources, where all of a sudden it wasn't about the cost of the unit, it was about the quality of the unit and what it could contribute to your strategy. So I totally think that you were spot on with the thought that right now, with a very limited card pool, there's probably not a ton of combos really worth investing into the point where you want to play a out of aspect card because of the inefficiency of it. But as ramping effects become more prevalent, as certain combinations of cards become more powerful, that's certainly something that the door is open to see this in the game, where somebody's actually motivated. I don't care about what aspects they are. I just need this card in this deck. And so I think that it's a cool thing to have that on the table, even if it's not being utilized right now.
I totally agree with you on that. And I did, but we're going to get into the history of card games in just a second. But this ties into it really well. Fantasy Flight has historically not done great at keeping their card games around. And one of their big pushes with Unlimited was to reestablish faith with their fan base. That was one of their big things. So this is the biggest team that's ever worked on a card game for them. They are also working on sets that are due to come out I think in like 2027. So they're currently working 8 to 9 sets out, and they have begun releasing artwork for set 2 several days before set 1 dropped. So they are, to a certain extent at least, beginning to put their best foot forward, which is great because Star Wars has a litany of games in the graveyard when it comes to card games. And Ralph is going to tell us actually many of them still have loyal fan bases, but they're not currently in development and not releasing new things. So Ralph, do us a favor, take us on the grand tour through Star Wars card game history.
Yeah. Just a couple disclaimers right off the bat. I played these games. I did not win tournaments with them. I did not, was not an expert and be all, but I played them. I was alive then and an adult then, and paid money and went to card shops and whatnot. And the other thing is that everybody likes a game. And I found that, your mileage may vary. That I found that the objectivity about games that you loved kind of shrinks as you get further away from it. I mean, get me talking about versus system, and I'll just go on and on.
Hey,
and
I'll join you.
Yeah, that's to me, collecting card games were solved with versus, and everything else is a pale imitator. But I will show you this right off the bat, and Ian doesn't know that I'm doing this, but the very first Star Wars game he played was Star Wars Clash of the Lightsabers. And boy, there's that light is bright. Clash of the Lightsabers. You got these cute little pewter Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul. It was like, I think this was, I forget who made this. I could look, but Kenner or somebody made this. And it was actually an okay game. You had 3 lanes. It was not collectible, but you had 3 lanes and you dueled and your little, your pewter characters were just really markers to track how many rounds you had won. But you would just kind of like Marvel Snap. You played 3 and you finished 1 though, and then you moved on to the second. Whoever won 2 of 3, and we would play that. It was cool. And Obi-Wan was in there, and so anyway, that was the first one that he played. The first one that I played though, and I got to say, is the big Jabba-sized card game at the beginning of it all, when collectible card games first came out, was Decipher's Star Wars collectible card game, or customizable card game, if you will, CCG. This is the one that gamers my age compare all subsequent Star Wars collectible games to. It was huge. It was second in sales only to Magic for years. And and a great game, and it has it's such an active fan base still, that you can go online, and I'll send the links over if you're interested. You can go and see, and they've got a lot of new cards that fans have created. They still have a presence at big gaming conventions like Gen Con, and they're rabid. They're wonderful group. But anyway, this was here's some of the cards from this. Basically, this card game, you could do pretty much anything that you wanted to do in Star Wars, as long as you could, as long as you could build your deck around it. You could put Han on and Leia, in the Millennium Falcon, and run over and fight people, or you could concentrate on 1-to-1 Jedi battles, or whatever it is that you wanted to do. They were divided into light and dark side decks. It was a shared turn where you kind of went back and forth until everything was done. You could move around it was location based. You would put down these locations, and usually they had a couple different sides to them. There you go. I don't know if that's correct or not, but on one side would be the dark side played toward that player. The other side would be the light side. And you would build a space line, if you will, of ground locations, all in a row, space locations, etc., and move around and have fights over them. But the coolest thing of the game was its resource system, and its which was also its game ending system as well. That your deck of cards that you have yet to draw from, that's where your resources came from. You would look and find on locations that you controlled or weren't controlled, and you have these little lightsaber symbols that would tell you how many cards you could draw into a force pile. And that force pile, no matter how big it was, is what you did everything from. So you would discard cards to pay for a 4-drop, a ship coming in. You could just toss 4 into a reusable pile, or you could draw cards from that. And if you didn't use them all, you could save 3 for the next turn. So it was a really elegant way that this gave you resources. You weren't taking up table space with that. You had a little force pile, and each card was 1 unit of force. Okay. However, the other side of it was that at the end of certain rounds and end of battles, you would get force drained, and you would have to take cards off the top of your deck into an out of play discard area. And that's how you won or lost the game, was making the other player lose all their force. So when you couldn't reshuffle those back in, your game was done. Just a wonderful way to keep track of it. It was elegant. You could just put the thing in your pocket and go. It was terrific. I played it for a while. I came in about 3 years with it, bought a really nice starter deck or starter box, and played it for a while. Card Shop was very welcoming and whatever. And after playing it for a couple of months and by myself a lot, I put it aside and it collected dust, and I didn't even really touch it again until a game store where Ian and I played Versus had a fan group. They wanted physical cards. I traded it for store credit so I could get more Versus cards.
Worth.
No, it was good. I mean, that was fine. It was, important to them, and I got what I wanted. So that was great. And the reason why, as I said, it was a great game, and it really was. The problem was it was so hard to get into if you weren't there from the beginning. And when you opened up the starter deck, you got a Luke and you got a Vader. In fact, it was a weird Luke. He's like sitting around wishing he would go someplace, wishing he'd get off of Tatooine. Vader looked cool, but and these were all, as you saw, they were all screen grabs, which was really cool at the time. Not some artwork. It's actually from the movies. That was cool to us. Yeah. Whoa.
I'd hate that now.
Yeah, I do. Now it's like, do something. But the issue with it was you got Luke and you got Vader, and that was it. And all of the cards and the characters you wanted to play with were chase rares, and they were powerful. I think I bought a bunch of boosters, and I think the only thing I ever got was Lando Calrissian. And so you were ending up playing with, the third Jawa from the left, that was in the background that they grabbed, and the pictures of the, of some of the, of the weapon. Oh yeah, let's take a weapon here, right? And this way, let me get it into the picture. There. Oh yeah, great. It's like they took this shot, when they were
superimposed it on a blank.
Yeah, and so it was boring. And the locations you put down, they weren't cool places. There were so many in the starter deck. Death Star corridors. Corridor number 5, prison, and it's like, I just, so. It wasn't
lazy.
Worth it.
That's very lazy.
Yeah, very
all
lazy.
All of the Star Wars locations you could pick from.
I guess they didn't have the prequels back then.
I think, yeah, they had the original, and they had a ton of expansions. Like I said, very well supported. Some years later, they when kind of the fan base was thinning out to just the diehards, they came out and they said, well, we need to inject some of this, and we need to get some. This game was very complicated, very much a gamer's game. We need to simplify things, and they came out with Young Jedi. I won't spend a ton of time on Young Jedi because pretty much everybody agrees that it's Banther Poodoo or whatever. But I will say that they had it again was locations. You'd put down a boring location and you both fought over it. And you brought in things, and it came out around time of Phantom Menace. And so you had lots of battle droids and whatever. They were still stingy with the characters you wanted, Qui-Gon and whatever. You got a Padawan, Obi-Wan, and that was about it. And then you just fought over that. There was really no space game in it. I mean, once you won or lost one of these locations, about the only thing is you could play a space ship and get those cards back and shuffle them back into your deck. That was pretty much the space battle part of it. The only cool thing that I thought was cool, and a mechanic I'd love to see somewhere else, it kind of rhymes with Legend of the Five Rings in their attack mode, is when it was time to attack, and you're only playing one boring location, you would scoop up all your cards, and you would arrange the battle plan what you wanted, and then you'd put them down, and you'd each have your little stack of the characters that you put down with the weapons and all that, and you would flip them up one by one and see who won.
So,
So
you're
I might,
you're like playing war.
yes,
Kind of bluffing, like
Yeah,
a stack deck.
yeah. When that's it, you know, you put your really big guys in the back or in the front. So you might flip up, and you know, you have a Jawa with a Magnum 357, right? And then you would play, you know, Obi-Wan with a pointed stick or something, right? And they would go at each end. Okay, well, the math works out here. And then the same, you could either win 2 of 3 locations. Heard that before. Or
Marvel
you
Snap.
you could deck them out. So there's an active fan group. They probably came up with much more creative cards. Pod racing became a thing that really irritated some people, but there you go. So Decipher lost. Oh, actually, Decipher made one other game. I didn't even really know about it until I was reading about this. It was called Jedi Knights. And they most people think they just made it because they knew they were losing the license. Let's cash in on something. I'm not that cynical, but some people think that's what it was. It generally was considered to be a bad game. But one cool thing was that the cards, the artwork was computer generated.
Whoa.
Ooh, yeah. In fact,
What year was this? What year would this have been?
2000s. Like
Oh,
around
well, okay.
2000.
So wow.
And they said that they never
so
they
cool.
never had a Chewy card because they couldn't get the hair. It would look like a bunch of worms or tentacles. So, but the one thing that they did was that there were character cards that they would have a left and right version of them. And so like a Viewmaster or the old stereo Optigons, it was in 3D, and you could hold them both up, and you'd have two Hans left and right, and it'd be in 3D if you could get your eyes adjusted, right? And you could turn it and like his chin would come out at you, you know. And
20 years before ChatGPT, there was Worm Chewbacca.
Anyway, so we're marching along. The much hated Wizards of the Coast at the time got the license, and there's Dooku, and they came out with the Star Wars The Trading Card Game, not to be confused with Collectible Card Game and The Card Game, et cetera, et cetera. And there's Dooku. They came out at Attack of the Clones. Now, one thing that they did right and very right was they were not stingy with characters and ships you wanted to play. Okay, there's Anakin, there's Tyrannus, Padme, you know, there's Kit Fisto.
Kit Fisto.
One of his favorite Jedis. Right. And so
one.
they understood that. And the thing is that there was no real uniqueness rule. You could stack them and then put the one that you wanted, the power you wanted on top, and use that. And so there was cool things you could do with the stack. It was really neat. You were fighting in 3 lanes. You had a ground, a space, like our current Star Wars Unlimited, and you also had a character lane. And so you would have spaceships in one, you would have tanks and AT-ATs and that kind of stuff in the ground lane. And then you would have Dooku and Obi-Wan and Darth Vader and all these guys duking it out over here. So it really gave you the feeling of like the end of Attack of the Phantom Menace or Return of the Jedi, when you've got these massive space fights going on, and then you've got down on the ground, people are hacking at each other with, glowing sticks, right? So that was really cool. And they also had an early version of speed. So if you were in the space thing, for example, you would, if you had a little X-Wing, would go first to attack before the great big capital ship, which makes total sense.
Like initiative,
and then you would
D&D
go through that.
Whatever.
Then they had a randomizer dice, and you'd roll a certain number of dice to see if you hit. And that was all kind of cool. I like games that everything's not a sure thing. It's just not cardboard math. Right? The main problem I had with that version of Wizards game with the resource was that while you could build your characters, as I mentioned, and store them up, you rolled a die and you found out, oh, this turn the force is not strong with me. I only have 2 points to build with. And then if I had characters in the lanes, well, you get an extra point. It's all, oh man, I was going to bring out these great big cards, and it's both players. So,
the dice giveth and the dice taketh away, much like Settlers of Catan.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
No sheep this turn.
And I always enjoyed games where the economy mattered, and you could choose whether or not, like, and we were talking about L5R before, you could choose to spend your early resources to build, rice paddies and ports and things like that, and then not have so many guys to attack with, or you could say, I need to get right in there and start shooting arrows, and so
And that's
we'll wait
that's
on
the
that.
old Legend of the Five
Right,
Rings.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that was good. We liked that.
Yeah. The new version was like, oh no, everybody gets the same, and you get 7 per round, and it's like, really?
Well, you
No.
and I don't agree on this, because you
No.
could stockpile it.
Yeah.
You could stockpile. So it was. I loved that game.
Well,
Also,
I love the game. I love the
also
game.
a Fantasy Flight.
That was one thing.
Also a Fantasy Flight game.
Yeah, they picked
and
it
one
up.
of the designers
Right.
is also on Star Wars.
Okay.
Tyler Parrott.
That's true. And
So
we can talk about that in a minute. But just winding down. You can see this little ship here. This is not a Star Wars ship, of course, but the reason why I'm bringing this out was that Whiz Kids brought out, and all I have of it is this little sample that they gave you. They had these little pocket models, they called them, that came with cards. Basically an inexpensive, there it goes. Basically an inexpensive, well, not if you bought all the packs, but inexpensive miniature system. So you could build, X-Wings that had a 3-dimensional element to them and whatever. It was only around for a couple of years, and then it went away when Fleer bought it. There were some other smaller things where they picked up tops, had almost a system of war. And then we flash forward into Fantasy Flight. I did not play any of these games because I was already heavily invested in Lord of the Rings, the card game, which was a cooperative card game that came out with a lot of packs. And then, of course, we started playing we played Legends of the Five Rings when it was with AEG, and then when Fantasy Flight picked it up. But they had 2 Star Wars games of note. One was Star Wars, the card game. I did actually play that a couple of times at the game store, and it seemed to be fun. Those people seemed to like it.
That was
an
their living card
LCG
game.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with the LCG model, it just basically everybody had the access to the same cards. You would usually buy a Fantasy Flight had a bad habit in those days of making you buy 3 core boxes.
3
and they
starter
were
sets, yeah.
To get
to be able to get, I need 4 cards in the deck. Well, you have to buy 3 big, huge boxes of cards.
And there's no singles market really for those LCGs because
Well, and I think like Fantasy Flight has a history with those, right? They made Arkham Horror the LCG, Star Wars the LCG, Lord of the Rings the LCG, and now Marvel Champions, Game of Thrones, Marvel Champions is different, but it's also an LCG,
right?
And so I think they've had at bare minimum 5 different large. Really, all that Fantasy Flight does is they buy huge IPs and then they milk those suckers as long as they can. And that's definitely true with their living card game system.
Yeah, and you would get monthly a chapter pack or however they for a force pack or a doggy bag or whatever you want to call it would come out, and then you would crack that. I mean, everybody would have access to the same thing. The general theory is, and for the most part, I think it's right. It's tough to do a competitive game with this because when you start having multiple factions or clans in L5R, each pack that comes out, is going to have 50 cards. Well, only 2 or 3 in multiples are going to be added to each deck. So it's a very slow process of bringing that out. Where in a collectible card game, you can have like most of it being the adventure you're going to play against, and then a handful of cards, heroes or whatever in the case of Lord of the Rings. But these 2 were very well loved, very well received. There's some debate about in the LCG, the card game, about how much it felt like Star Wars. Some people thought it really did. It was based on objectives. You would build your deck and put down 5 objectives if you were on the light side, and you needed to achieve those. The dark side, of course, was trying to defeat those. They had their own objectives, but their primary goal was to mess up your day. And they had a counter that basically you could extend it and change, but basically they started counting down, and if for all intents and purposes 12 turns you didn't defeat the dark side, you lost. And so, but some people are like, I don't like that. I just wanted to do this. And other people thought that the deck building was great because the objectives would have certain cards that you had to put into your deck, like Marvel Champions does with their heroes. I don't know enough about it to say. I just know that some people really loved it and other people are like, it doesn't feel like Star Wars. The other one that they had was actually a collectible card game with Star Wars Destiny. And
Yep.
this was the last one that they did that ended
Wildly
in
popular.
wildly popular. Oh my
Very
God.
popular.
And the artwork, I looked it up. If you go to ccctrader.com, you can see all these ancient games and some are like really stupid. Austin Powers, the trading card game. I'm not kidding.
I somehow I
It's there.
believe that.
Yeah, but you can see all these things, and the artwork on Destiny was just phenomenal. It just was so good, it came in packs. Yeah, thank you very much. It came in packs, and it had dice with them. Again, we're back to dice, and you would it had a lot of icons on it. You would roll the dice, and one of an action might be to roll the dice and then activate and use the dice for like Kylo Ren or whoever. And the battles were just, supposed to be very, very engaging. In fact, what I read more than once when I was looking at the reviews on this is that it was almost more fun casually, that where you could just buy a starter pack and get in there and just play because that was fun. But to be competitive, it cost a lot of money to get the dice and get the cards that you needed. And so that seemed to be a barrier to some people, but wildly loved. And the other thing was, since you had all the dice, it really, you had to build up your core to be able to carry in a box of this, because it had lots and lots of things. Oh, the other thing I want to mention, and
He
so
sold
that's
a dice binder.
a dice binder. Yeah.
A
Yeah.
dice binder.
But I mean, look at the artwork on this thing. It's just gorgeous.
It really is.
At the time when this was coming out, we were playing L5R,
right.
and I have a couple sets of the sleeves that I used. Specifically, I had a L5R Imperial deck, which of course I had the Emperor right there, the Force Lightning sleeves. And I might, now that Star Wars Unlimited is a thing, I'm gonna have to go dig those out.
Oh yeah.
And put some
this Vader's incredible.
I think I have some Leia
sleeves
cards.
Yeah, they
some
are
Leia card sleeves.
I also have the Return of the Jedi ones, I think. So I remember we got we went to a L5R tournament, Dad and Gibby might have been there for that. And they basically gave us store credit for winning, or for placing. And then we were like, well, what do we use these on? And then we found all of these, all of these were on sale, all of these sleeves, and just bought a ton of it. And the artwork's just so good.
And I remember I splurged on Princess Bride sleeves.
Oh, yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah, and so it was themed with some of the things going on in my decks. But also, too, I should mention that the really ridiculously popular in Japan and some in America Weiss Schwarz game, which I don't know if you know anything about, but Weiss Schwarz, German for white and black, but actually in Japan, it's like the Weiss or Weiss cards are the pretty cards. So the nice Japanese anime,
the anime waifus,
right? Yes,
right.
And
the
gotcha. Schwarz is the Schwarz be with you. The Schwarz is the cool cards, and so there's a whole Star Wars set in Weiss Schwarz. It's on the cool side on that, and I mean, and they have it's ridiculous how many great IPs that Weiss Schwarz has. And they say they won't really change the rules. A lot of times it's just repetitive, but like there's a Ninja Batman set in Weiss Schwarz. But
it
anyway.
Sounds like the kind of game that I would hate because of consistency issues.
Yeah,
like
you would.
You'd be like, oh, I want to play my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles against the Dark Lord of the Sith.
You can't. Yeah, no. Yeah, you have to play against the Spy X Family Children or something like that.
Okay. Well, hey, I do love. Anyway. I do love that show, but great artwork.
That's kind of it where we are now. Thanks for hanging in there and listening to all these things. I mean, I appreciate it. I love geeking out about mechanics, especially on these. The most thematic ones were probably the very early ones. Anyway, so there we are.
Nice.
I think Unlimited stacks up really well with the themes of these.
If there's anything to take away from this, it's that the history of Star Wars and card games is rife with failure, especially stacked up to the fact that you're comparing this. Well, Fantasy Flight 2. But if we can transition the discussion here, I gotta be
Please.
honest. First impressions is something we always do on the first episode of a starter set covering an episode, and the first impressions for this game, I think for all of us, were resoundingly positive.
Mhm.
Mark, if you want to lead us in, you got your hands on the stuff before Dad and I did. You know, where do we start this conversation? Like,
You know,
there's
I think there's a wide variety of things that you can talk about with this game. Um, I think one of the most interesting things for me is the various places that I see Fantasy Flight devs took inspiration, right? The passing back and forth from both previous Star Wars games, and to me also seems like the Legend of Runeterra grouping, the Legend of Runeterra game,
Mhm.
which is arguably was one of the most strategic parts about that game, and certainly wasn't the reason the game was bad in the end of the day, right? I think that the deck building, despite the fact that when you get into Constructed, Unlimited is really kind of the gimmick in it. The deck building is incredibly interesting. This ability to match your leader with your base is very, very interesting. I cracked open my first packs, and granted, I think that where this game, if there is a place where this game at release has fallen short, it is in some of its artwork, which is kind of a shame because Star Wars has the ability to have some of the most incredible artwork. One of the places where this game really shines is the excitement of opening a pack of cards, because you're getting more cards than you do in almost any other game. You're getting 16 cards. You're getting a leader, and that leader has a chance to be a rare leader. There are 4 leaders for every faction, 2 commons, 2 rares. There's 2 extras, 1 aggression, 1 vigilance, which are Luke and Vader. And that leader also has the chance to be hyperspace, which means borderless. You get the little dashes around the edge of them. Then every common card that is coming has a chance to be borderless. Then you get 3 uncommon cards, and your last uncommon card has the chance to be upgraded to a borderless legendary or rare. Then you get a rare or a legendary, and then you get a holo that could be a borderless holo, and it could be common, uncommon, rare, or legendary. So quite literally, I think the pack opening experience for this game in comparison to other games is quite thrilling because you actually want to look at every card. Like,
Mhm.
I think pack opening for this game has been more fun, despite some of the artwork that I found to be a little lackluster in some cases. I think that has been really fun. It has some very iconic characters. It has, a lot of the ones that you would want in the base set for a game. And I think that the game is really balanced mechanically. I think that the initiative taking is nuanced and strategic and fun. I think that the draw to mechanic makes this game so unique in the fact that it's the only TCG I've ever played that you didn't try to put in as much card draw as you could in most cases, right? Like, I've never run out of cards in this game. And I've played a handful of games, both control and aggressive strategies. And I have found it to be like, I always felt like I had something I could do. I never felt like I was, in Magic and Pokemon, you can miss the cards you need, and that feels bad. In Lorcana, I always felt like I didn't have enough access to getting cards from my deck, at least in the base set. I realized DVN that may have changed, but I think draw is still at a premium in that game 3 sets in. Am I right about that?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It is much more universal, right? There's access to card draw in all of the colors now, some more efficient than others. But you're right. Card draw is so much at a premium that anything that can draw cards with ease is instantly increases in value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in this game, the draw 2 mechanic changes that. And I feel like when I play this game, I get to focus on the game and not my disappointment of not having the right cards in my hand or not having enough cards in my hand. I think the fact that you can resource anything, which, to be fair, Lorcana with their inking cards, I think is brilliant. I really like that resource system. This one, I'm not saying I like more or less, but I think there's this interesting decision point every round where you draw 2 cards and you're like, do I start taking card advantage now or do I keep resourcing? Because there's going to come a point when you stop resourcing and you just start saying, okay, I'm going to try to win my lanes. And then honestly, the 2 lane mechanic between space and ground was one of my all-time favorite things in Tessel, the Elder Scrolls Legends, and I freaking love it in this game as well. The ability to feel like you're losing out on one lane and flex to the other lane, or just go heavy in one lane and try to race your opponent. I've
Yeah.
had games where we raced. I've had games where we competed and fought back and forth. All of those things, I think for me in the initial playing of this game, it just allowed me to really stay focused on the game itself. And I think that's been great. DVN, how about you you guys busted open some packs, did some mega draft, played the starter decks. Tell me about your first experiences with mechanics and the gameplay.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, when it comes to the pack opening experience, I have really nothing more to add other than to sort of agree that pack opening in that game feels better than pack opening in any other card game I've ever played, because there's always a chance for any of the cards to be really special, whether it's the foils or the hyperspace or whatever. I also think that looking at the card arts online did not do it justice. I think and the borders irritate me significantly less when they're in my hands. The card artwork is, which I at first thought was a little bit basic in many of them. There's actually a lot more detail, vibrant colors. So I think that there are some artworks that are objectively bad, like the Chewbacca leader, right? But
Han leader is awful.
Super bad. But the ones
This
that
guy.
Zeb, they could have done better to our boy Zeb.
Zeb they did Zeb bad, man. They did Zeb real bad.
Yeah,
Show
it's not
Han.
good.
Show Han.
Yeah, we got to pull up Han on the screen here. Hold on.
Han might be one of the worst.
He looks
artists.
like a wood elf.
He looks like an elf. Yes.
He does. He looks terrible. His showcase isn't awful.
The showcase is
That's not
fantastic. That's just Harrison Ford,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
But anyways, setting that aside, as far as the mechanics go, playing the game, and so Dad and I, we busted out the starter deck, the 2-player starter, which I want to also throw out something here. Compared to Pokemon and compared to Lorcana, the two games I've played physically more, obviously in this last year or so, right? The 2-player starter deck felt like the best value, the closest, where you're getting 2 decks that are actually somewhat evenly matched, and you get key characters, cool cards. Like the Rebel side, Luke's deck has at least one of all of your favorite characters: C-3PO, R2-D2, Han Solo, Chewbacca, Leia, Obi-Wan, and Yoda. All of the original trilogy main characters, right? Big names, Han Solo, all of them show up in the starter deck. It didn't feel like they were trying to do what Dad mentioned so many of the other games in the past did, which was to limit your access and put a paywall in front of the characters you know and love. And that was abundantly clear. Cracking open the starter decks, I did not expect that. I was so pleasantly surprised that I had so many of these iconic characters. And the decks felt somewhat cohesive. Obviously not incredible compared to what a standard constructed deck would be, but in terms of they functioned with strategy. They were thought out, the starter decks, which is something you cannot say, especially for Lorcana.
No.
And you cannot say for Pokemon, with the exception of the pricier League battle decks, which I know is a slightly newer occurrence, and good on Pokemon for doing that, by the way.
I will chime in real quick, DVN, and say this too. There are 8 cards that are only in the starter set. So they are R2-D2, C-3PO, Luke's lightsaber, and Leia. And in the other one, they are Krennic, I think I Am Your Father, Vader's lightsaber, and then there's one other Imperial lackey unit. So to be clear, you can only get them. And right now, if you can't get a pre-release, you can also only get the Luke and Vader leaders from the 2-player starter deck. But on top of that, if you go to your local game shop and play, they have these 3-card packs. You can get one a week, and in them are hyperspace versions of those 8 cards that are in the starter deck. So you can get a hyperspace Luke's lightsaber, R2-D2, C-3PO, Leia, if you go to your local LGS and play on a game day, and you earn one of those special 3-card packs each week. It's the only way that you can get the hyperspace non-bordered variant of those 8 cards, which is a super cool thing because, man, do I not want Luke's lightsaber. I want to go to my LGS and play so that I get a chance of getting, borderless R2D2. So I'll toss it back to you, but I wanted to point that out because they did do that, and they gave you a play set of each of them. So you only have to buy one starter set.
Right.
Nice.
And we noticed that too. We're like saying, oh, wow, there's actually 3 of Luke's lightsabers in here, but did not realize they were exclusive. So anyways, it feels generous. It feels like a good deal. And playing it feels smooth in that, like, the decks function like, like they are thought out, because they are. And you cannot say that for especially Lorcana starter decks, which are notoriously terrible. Sometimes there's valuable cards in there, but they're bad. They're not thought out at all. So I want to, as far as the mechanics go, for my first impressions, we played, and I was pretty impressed with the passing and the shared turn system. Now, Dad and I have played a lot of card games, collectible card games with shared turn systems, most notably Versus, although that one was maybe a little bit closer to Runeterra in terms of the way that, like, you would do all of your attacks, and then your opponent, if they had anything left, would do all of their attacks back, and then you'd shift the initiative the other way. This feels closer to, surprise, surprise, the new Legend of the Five Rings, or new 5R as we often call it, right? Which is where you would, when you'd go into a conflict against an opponent, there would be the idea of, I play an action, you play an action, I play an action, you play an action, pass, done, right? It's very, very similar. The difference, and what I think works for Star Wars Unlimited, is that component of new 5R could take a long time, as you're drawing sometimes up to 5 cards per turn in that game, and just without any other effects, because of the way the card draw system worked. And so you would often sit there, duke it out over one conflict, and there would be times when the conflict wouldn't resolve, or rather there would be a winner or loser, but the province wouldn't break, and therefore you wouldn't advance towards your win condition. And so the games were notorious for taking quite a long time.
They did, yeah.
They felt like, and I think that was not necessarily a bad thing. It felt like a war, right? Like, every game of Legend of the Five Rings felt like a war, which was cool. But I don't know if that's what you would have wanted for a game like Star Wars, especially because you're trying to make the game significantly more accessible than Legend of the Five Rings was, because that game was real hard and not accessible, hard to teach, a ton of things you had to keep track of. This game is significantly more streamlined, which I think favors it. But it is nice to see that you have this sort of Hearthstone, especially like OG Hearthstone, like the first 4 or 5 years of Hearthstone level game speed, right? Where it's not Marvel Snap fast, but it is not as slow as some of the other games on the market. It fits right into that Lorcana level average game length, which is really nice to see. And part of that is that you have significant agency as an attacker to choose between attacking face or clearing units. There's, removal still seems semi-sparse, so it's not like you have games that are grinding for forever, and especially not with limited card pools that we had when we played the starter decks and the sealed package. But I happen to know that from a meta perspective, some of the best decks in the game are very fast decks that can win pretty quickly. So but that's really not, I think, what impressed me the most. I think really what impressed me the most was the intrigue behind taking the initiative. And there were some key moments that we were playing pretty chill, like, oh, do you want to take that back? Oh, do you want to do that? And there was one moment I remember when I had Dad on the ropes, and we were talking through the play where I had amassed a board, and I don't even think this one was one we recorded. I think this was one we played just for fun off camera, and it was a situation where it was like, I pointed out to Dad, he was like, I can take these trades, or I have these 2 units in space. I don't want to do nothing with them, right? Like, and I feel like I should just. It's one of those things where, in a game like Hearthstone or Tessel, you would just swing with your units on the face for lack of a better thing to do with them, right? There's no disadvantage to that. But every action you take actually matters if you want the initiative. And I pointed out, if you do something with these units, I'm going to take the initiative and then go face on the first action, and you will not get an opportunity to try to save yourself by removing one of my units before I can hit for face and hit for lethal. And of course, playing through that, there was a situation where the best thing to do was take the initiative before and do nothing with your unit. So there's a lot of nuance there, which I think won't be relevant in every game, but certainly, especially after the first 3 turns, becomes significantly more important in trying to,
Agreed.
not just predict what your opponent's going to do, but there's a little bit of bluffing where like, oh, okay, they've got 2 or 1 resource left. Do I think that they're going to play? They have no other things they can do on board. Do I think that they're going to play a card with the last 1 or 2, or should I just go ahead and take the initiative now? Or can I squeeze in 1 more attack? You know what I mean? Like, it's really interesting. And then the last thing I'll say, and I want to pass over to Dad, the 2-lane system. At first, I kind of rolled my eyes at, because it felt like most games people were playing into just 1 lane and duking out in that 1 lane, or one person went one way, one person went the other way, and there was very little interaction between them. Until I played a game against Dad, again, where I had been going fast. I had dominated the ground arena, aka the field lane. I had dominated the ground arena, and then he dropped the Bendu, a huge Sentinel unit. This was in our sealed thing. Paid a premium on it, I think. And dropped the Bendu and was like huge Sentinel. And I'm like, oh man, I finally ran out of steam in my ground arena. And he's got these big units. And I'm like, okay, crap. And I drew my next 2 cards. And I realized I had the ability to shift gears and go into the space lane to try to get the last 7 or 8 damage on the base, and successfully was able to do what I used to do all the time in Tessel, which is when you lose field lane, quickly jump over to Shadow and play the last couple things over there. And that just gave me this great nostalgic feeling around that mechanic. And I really, really like the bones of this game a lot. That's I said a lot there. I want to leave something on the table for Dad to talk about. So let me pass it over to you. Just give us your first impressions as the most seasoned card gamer here. Yes, and I am implying that you're old, but
no, I'm well seasoned.
That's right. It's it's not the years, it's the mileage, right?
Yeah, exactly. Another IP. There you go.
That's right.
I think my microphone has switched over to my webcam, and I apologize for that, but that's okay.
We can pause here, and you can switch it over if you need.
I've been trying to, and I can't. It won't let me.
No.
So that's okay.
Okay, jump in. Wait. Okay, go.
Well, okay. So much of what you've talked about here is I share those points of view. So I'll keep this brief. The artwork, I was hesitant about it. I love the hyperspace. I love the floating things, and that's great. But in particular, I'm a real big fan of when the ships are foils. They really pop
slick
off the card. They really did a great job. I was like, ooh, look at that. I don't even know what ship that is, and it's looking really good. So I like that a lot. The 2-card drawing is similar. Ian and I have played. Versus had that, and it also had a face down lane of resources that you would put down, like Lorcana does. You would have that. The interesting thing that I would love to see in Star Wars eventually, as we were talking about this, is that Versus had the ability to use that resource row. You could flip up an effect from the resource row and put it face up for locations and whatnot. And Star Wars doesn't do that. Once you've stuck them in there, they're there. I wouldn't mind, and maybe we'll see that in the future, of being able to tap into that. I did run out of cards on one of our games. And I had to stop putting resources down because I needed those cards. And then I'm getting, I had like 9 resources down. And then I ended up with 3 cards in my hand that were like 2 cost and 1 cost and wah. the dangers of a sealed deck that you've built. But I did run out of cards, and the two was like, oh man, what about this? But Moff Tarkin comes in, and different people come in, and you can use a recruit, and you can fill those up. So they've got their eye on that. The I was a little bit concerned about the mechanics because I think it's fair to say they're not really inventing an awful lot in this game. It's if you've played any of these, as we mentioned earlier, overwhelm, trample, taunt, they're all going to be really familiar to you. However, that means your entry point to this game is very fast. We cracked open the things, and Ian's like, "Yeah, I've never played this. I haven't read the rules," and we just played. I had read the rules, but it was like, yeah, "What is this?" And a couple times we had to look. I will say that
I'm going to interrupt here,
Yeah,
which is that it was blazingly fast how easy it was to pick up this game. And now, granted, I have a background in this, but
Sure.
like it is there's very few like fiddly things that you need to know.
No,
It's all on the cards. It's all right there. As long
Yep.
as you know how the ordering of the regroup phase and the action phase go, it is so easy to get started, especially as a gamer. Like it took me 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes to like look at the little rulebook, be like, yep, done it. Cool, great, let's play. Like,
yeah,
wow.
it was very, and I agree with you that the starter deck was a really good product. I will say that I had a little bit of an issue with the tokens. They were super duper thin, and whatever, and that's not typical of Fantasy Flight. Usually, you get a little bit heftier thing. I mean, you get into the bigger LCGs, and you get neat little dials, which I think would be really good to put on your base. Have a nice 30 card thematic dial that you can count down. I would love to see that kind of thing. Not that I expect that in a starter deck.
Yeah.
But of course, the cards were very high quality. You wanted to sleeve them because you wanted to preserve their quality. And the starter deck experience was really good. Not only did they have two players, two heroes that really keyed off of and played against each other. Lucas throwing out divine shields, and Vader can ping it to bust it and then hit, and then go in and attack. That's really, really great. But the 3 games that we played one on camera, and then the other 2 we played, each one was different. One was really heavily dominated by the dark side and the space lane, and the other ones. So it's like that was encouraging.
And one of them was dominated by C-3PO.
By C-3PO with a lightsaber.
Oh, there you go. Listen, the fantasy is real.
C-3PO is carrying around Luke's lightsaber, and waving it around and killing everything. It was awesome.
That was amazing to look at.
Star Wars Unlimited.
Like, what? Yeah, that was good. I love deck building. That's one of the reasons why I keep getting drawn and spending so much, mortgage money on CCGs is because I love the options that are available to you, and I like the CCG model a lot of times because you can't have everything, and so you have to fill in those gaps. I love it, and I love the options that you have when you're staring at all these cards. I am concerned that someone that's relatively new to this or can't, necessarily think quickly on the fly, if you have a 30-minute limit or 15-minute limit to put your deck together, it's hard to organize these little dots and figure out, oh, how do I do this? Now, you know that villainy and hero at this point anyway aren't on the same card, but you can start dividing that. Luckily, there's only 3 types of cards at this point, so that's handy. But I think that might be a barrier to some newer players trying to build a deck on the fly simply because there's so many dots to keep track of. But overall, I thought what they did, these familiar mechanics, I thought they did very well. It was very thematic. I do have one criticism. The more I've thought about this, and I think it'll be handled in the upcoming expansions, is that it felt really thematic in the ground lane. It only felt like a bunch of models to me in the space lane, with the exception of Ian had the ghost that showed up, and like, oh, okay, that's
the ghost
cool.
rules.
Yeah, and Millennium Falcon showed up, and that was all right. But I think the thing is that, the characters are ultimately what make good Star Wars good. I mean, if you can talk about which things are good and which things are bad, and the plots are usually, they're kind of predictable and whatever. But it's really the characters. The ships are amazing, and oh gosh, that's terrific. But without you caring about Luke and Leia and Kylo Ren and there's the ones that you don't like, I didn't really care about Rey so much in the latest trilogy. I couldn't really. Oh, okay, she's nice. It's okay. I didn't have that feeling of she'd lived and whatever. So I didn't really care for it so much for those movies. You're playing these characters. Ian, and when we were off camera, I think we might have done one of these on camera. He brought out the whole Spectre group. Hera came in, and it was like they acted like you watch them, on the screen. Well, the Space Lane doesn't have that, and hopefully they'll start getting hero cards where it's Luke in Red 5. It's Luke in the X-Wing.
I was about to say that. That felt like a missed opportunity to not have at least one leader that goes into the space lane. And Hera jumping in the cockpit of the Ghost seems like something that should happen, right? Like, maybe not Luke in this situation, but sure. If they don't have an Anakin that is a pilot, it's going to be a huge missed opportunity. And I'll say this, we both agreed the ground arena felt like the default most important thing to fight over, because
Hands
if
down.
you can establish a board presence and dominance over there, then your leader is going to last longer because you can protect it and attack around it. So I think that would be way more interesting if there was you get into the game and you realize, oh wow, Hera is actually going to jump in the space lane, or but while Vader is going to be on the ground, or something like that. And so I do think that presents opportunities for them to release eventually leaders that are like, let's do a different leader version of, let's have Boba in Slave One, right? Let's have whatever, because Mando in his little Naboo starfighter. Yeah, exactly. And so I think for now that it's okay, but it does feel limiting in that factor. And I as we were playing, I hadn't looked up all the cards. I was like, I was assuming that there was a space leader, and then we looked at all of them. I was like, oh wait, there I guess there's not. Okay.
And the lanes don't interact. I think I only saw one card that you can be in the space lane and hit ground units. In some of these, this thing here, the Wizards version, you could cross over with different things. You could put pilots from the character. Anakin could get in a ship and move over to the space lane. And I guess hopefully we'll see some of that. I don't want to complicate the game too much. And final thing is, in just one sentence, the heroes to me are the best part of the game.
Oh yes, they're fun, and they
really
make you. It feels very different, and you can kind of build around them. I will say this about the space lane. So there are a couple of iconic ships. You have a couple of high-end Star Destroyers. You have a Ghost, Millennium Falcon, and you have Fett's Fire Spray is what it's called in this game. And I'll say this. So there's that. Then I will also say, like, Vader, Luke, Boba Fett, Bosk, Ezra, Kanan, Chewbacca, Han, Greedo, like, they tuned up every character that's iconic in its card form. Like, almost every single one of them is viable. The Emperor is incredible. Sabine is one of the main cards in every aggro deck right now. If you're running aggro, you're going to be running aggression, heroism, and it's going to be in that. Vader is arguably the most powerful card that you can drop in the game. Next to, maybe competes with Luke if he had a slightly better package around him. Kanan, an incredibly strong card. Dooku is one of the best cards that you can drop. So what I like about what they did here is they made a lot of cards that were good, but not only do you want to play the hero versions of the cards, because a lot of the cards are leaders and then they also have a hero version, right? So there is, other than Hera, I think, for the most part. So there's a Han leader, but then there's also a Han unit. I guess the Grand Inquisitor, Thrawn, and IG-88 don't have them either. So I'm a liar. A couple of them do. But the card version of these iconic characters are strong. So not only do you want to play them in your deck because they're cool, but you want to play them in their deck because they're meta as heck. And so like freaking Dooku, meta as heck. You want to get that in your deck. Boba is the most powerful deck in the game right now. There you go. You got your
This
Dooku.
was the card I was most excited to pull, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and he's very
Desperate
good.
for a Dooku, yeah.
He's so good too. So as we close up this section of the conversation and we move on to our favorite cards that we pulled so far, I will just say
I think the gun.
yeah, I think that they did a really good job on making the iconic cards very strong. And that's super cool to me. And the spaceships, you're right, 100%, Ralph, man. I got a couple of hyperspace hollows of a few ships. I have a 7th Fleet Defender hyperspace hollow. I have one other. Yeah. And honestly, that card right there that you're showing, the Green Squadron A-Ring, I would say that the space lane is not as important, like you guys said, but that card is one of the most powerful cards in the game.
That thing is stats. It's a stat stick.
Absolutely so strong. And I didn't even see that when I reviewed it, that it's very, very strong. And so I agree with you. It's not as important of a lane in terms of you're not going to focus on it as much. But if you just completely ignore one of the two lanes, you ain't winning, or very likely not. And so I think they did a decent job at balancing around that.
Sure.
Now, as we get ready to close the episode, I want to just, what card were you guys most excited about getting? What was your favorite card that you pulled from the set? I'll pull it up on the screen and pull the card up as well so that people can see it. But hey, we're cracking packs, guys, and that's exciting. Cracking packs is exciting. So, Ralph, how about you first? What was your favorite card that you got to play with, you got to break out?
Well, thematically, of course, I was tickled to see Yoda in the starter deck, and I love the idea that when these Jedi Masters, when they get defeated, they do good things for you. They help out. I love that kind of theme. So I was looking for that, and I was really liked the artwork on the old Obi-Wan. So the classic things to see, those were great. But as I played the game over and over, the card that I ended up just couldn't wait to see and play, and I don't even remember the whole name of it. It's Super Laser Technician or something to that effect.
That's it. This guy right here.
That's him. I mean, a little, what's he, a 3-drop? He's got 2/1, but look at his power. When he's defeated, okay, you may put this unit into play as a resource and ready it. This guy's the great equalizer for the dark side, I believe. I played some games with Thrawn, and of course I played Vader. Vader doesn't come in as early as Luke. Well, not with the Super Laser Technician. And because he can attack, he can just, if you don't want to attack him, okay, he can run into you and do a little ping damage. And all of a sudden, you not only have an extra resource, but it's ready. Unlike a lot of the things in Lorcana that you get the extra, Grandma Tala dies or whatever. She goes in there, but you can't use her that turn. This guy you can use that turn. And maybe that's that one resource you need to activate Vader, to, his little power, to do the one cost ping, or use Thrawn to, okay, I've looked at your card over there. I am going to take your Star Destroyer and we're going to exhaust it now because Thrawn doesn't want you to play it. And it's just all thanks to this little, worker guy here in his little Death Star cubicle going, okay, here we go, super laser. So that's him.
He's great. DVN, you said Dooku.
Yeah,
but it was an early, so I'll give you 2.
Okay, all right.
If you want 2, I'll give you 2.
Dooku was the card that I was most excited to pull because I knew that there was a Dooku in the set, and as I mentioned, one of my favorite characters, and there's no Qui-Gon. So, that being said, the thing I did not expect to love as much as I did, and then pulled it, and then played it, and then built an entire deck around it, and spent maybe $20 on some cards today, on some singles, was the Ghost, and I have a foil Ghost, and I love Star Wars Rebels. I really, really love that show. It holds a special place in my heart because I did not watch it until, a year ago. No, about like 8 months ago. I never watched it, and I got really horribly sick with the flu. Like, or maybe I don't know if it was COVID or not, but it was really, 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 really bad for like 2 weeks. I was barely sleeping. I was borderline delirious, and I binge watched all of Star Wars Rebels, and I fell in love with it. I When we were doing our little thing where we were pulling cracking packs and building decks, like almost like a expanded sealed thing, I got a Hera pretty early, and then made the joke as I'm opening the packs. Of course, we're recording the pack opening. I was like, if I pull enough Spectres, then I'll play Hera. And I pulled one of every Spectre, and
That's awesome.
including a copy of the Ghost, and it kicked ass. It was so fun. And getting to ignore the aspect penalties on all of the crew, all of the Star Wars Rebels, was just really a fun experience. And now I went ahead and picked up a bunch of cards, but mostly had to make sure I get 3 copies of the entire crew of the Spectre. So that's going to be, for better or for worse, it's probably not going to be meta. It seems like the kind of deck that's going to not be meta. But I tell you what, I will have a standard legal Harrison Dula Spectre crew deck, and I'm
Nice.
freaking amped about it.
That's really cool. That is
Oh,
really
and
cool.
also quick shout out to my foil borderless Alliance Dispatcher.
Oh, nice.
Pretty nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, the card that I was most excited to pull was Boba Fett, and I didn't pull a Boba Fett,
No.
so that didn't happen. But however, in one of my pre-release packs, I pulled a Darth Vader, and then I had pre-ordered a box and pulled a Darth Vader, and then the weekend that it released, I convinced my wife that I should buy a box, and I pulled a Darth Vader. So
Let's
in
go.
a very limited number of cards, I got a play set of the most expensive card. That was thrilling. Now, none of these are like super shiny or super cool or anything, but they are. I do have a playset of Vader, and I'm playing Iden Control Green Blue with Vader, and it's freaking so good. But the card that I was actually most excited to pull, well, the shiniest and coolest one, was I pulled a Ruthless Raider in both hyperspace and hollow, which is a really cool 6 resource 4/6 ship that when it hits the ground, it's aggression villainy. It deals 2 damage to an enemy unit and an enemy base, and then when it dies, it does the same thing. So it's a really heavily statted unit for the space lane because there's not a lot of really high statted units. And then on top of that, it has both a good on play effect and a good leave effect. So it's gone into one of my Twin Sons decks, and it's super shiny. I think I had 3 space units that are all Imperial. I had that one that was a hyperspace hollow, the 7th Fleet Defender, also as a hyperspace hollow, and then I don't remember what the last one is, but oh no, I do. It's red. I also picked up. Let me see here. It's this guy here, an Imperial Interceptor as a hyperspace hollow, and so that was kind of
really
cool.
sick artwork.
Yeah, and I got 3 hyperspace Imperial Interceptors, which means I have a playset of hyperspace, which is super fun.
That's
and really cool. So yeah, really pumped about it. Here's the truth. We have had a great time playing this game so far, and we are going to continue to talk about it over the next couple of weeks. Next week we're going to be talking about the market and what it has done since release, because some of these cards are not cheap. Some of these cards have gotten very expensive very quick. Ton of excitement around the game, and I honestly think it's like Fantasy Flight was prepared for the excitement, but the local game shop was not. And so there's not a ton of shops that are stocking it, not a ton of shops. There's only like one shop in my area that is. But there's a lot of people who are excited about it, and there's a lot of energy building around the game. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're also going to talk about the partnership between Fantasy Flight and GameGenic, and we're going to look at the really cool sleeves, deck boxes, and deck pods, and double deck pods that they released for this game, because they released it with a suite of like a whole line of equipment and mats and everything with really great artwork on them. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So stay tuned to next week's episode whenever we jump back on and chat about Star Wars Unlimited again. And let us know over in Discord if you're picking up the game. And if you want to play, hit me up on Discord, because I have a webcam set up. I can play Twin Suns, and I can play just, normal constructed. If you want to play, would love to get online and play with some people. I played with Steel. I forgot to give him a shout out. I played with Steel from our community tonight. We tried 2-player Twin Suns tonight, which was really cool. Guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, everybody, come back again next week for next episode.